Mean absolute deviation. The mean absolute deviation is the average distance between each data value and the mean. Find the mean absolute deviation of the following data. Here are 5 quiz scores. Step 1 is to find the mean, so you add all the scores together, divide by the number of scores, which is 5, and we get 84 as our average score. Step 2. Find the absolute deviation. To do this, you need to subtract the mean and each data point. Then take the absolute value of each difference. So for our score of 65, we take 65, we subtract the mean, 84, we get negative 19, then we just take the absolute value of that and we get 19 as our absolute deviation from the mean. So we can do that for each score, like that. Step 3. Find the mean absolute deviation, or MAD. To do this, find the mean using the absolute deviation numbers. So here's the last column from our previous slide, the absolute deviation from the mean. So all we're going to do is average together those numbers, 19, 9, 6, 6, and 16. We average those together by adding them together and then dividing by the number of numbers, which is 5, and we get 11.2 as our mean absolute deviation. This means that the average test score is 11.2 points from the mean of 84. The number of goals scored by the players on the boys and the girls lacrosse teams per game after each team has played 8 games are displayed below. Compare the mean absolute deviations for the goals scored per game. Step 1. Find the mean for each team. Alright, so we're going to add up all of the numbers. So in one game they scored 3, in the next game they scored 3, in another game 4. They scored 5 goals in 4 of the games, so 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, and then in one game they scored 10. And you add those all up and divide it by the number of games, which was 8. And these added together are 40, so 40 divided by 8 gives us 5. So that's the mean for the girls' team. For the boys' team, we have 2 plus 5 plus 6 3 times, plus 7 plus 8 plus 8, and divided by 8. These added up give us 48. Divided by 8 gives us an average of 6. Do your answers look like the two shown below? Yeah, so to calculate the mean, we just added up how many goals they got per game in all of these 8 games, averaged them out, and we got 5 and 6 for the boys' team. Step 2, find the absolute deviations. Alright, so I've gone ahead and filled out the tables. For the girls' team, we had these amount of goals for each of the 8 games. For the boys' team, we had this amount of goals. So then I subtract the mean from each of these numbers. The mean for the girls' team was 5. So 3 minus 5 gives us negative 2. Then we just take the absolute value and we get 2 as our absolute deviation. So I did this for all of the scores. Do your tables look like the two shown below? Yep, so these absolute deviations, 2, 2, 1, 0s, and 5, 4, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, and 2, are exactly as they are on the slide before. Step 3, find the mean absolute deviations. Alright, so all we have to do is take all of the absolute deviations from the previous slide and average them together. So 2, 2, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 5 averaged together, so you just add them up and divide by 8 and you get 1.25. And when you do the same thing for the boys' team, you also get 1.25. Do your answers look like the two shown below? Yes, they do. Comparison statements. 1.25 equals 1.25. The mean absolute deviation is equal for both the boys and the girls' lacrosse teams. This means that the data is equally dispersed along the number line in relation to each one's mean. On average, the boy players scored 1 more goal than the girls players. How do we know this? Well, remember, when comparing the averages, look at the means. The girls' average was 5 goals and the boys' average was 6 goals. The number of goals scored by 2 NHL teams during the first 25 games of the 2017-2018 season are shown in the dot plots below. Compare the mean absolute deviations for the goals scored per game. Since there are so many data points in each set, we can shorten the amount of work required using multiplication. For example, when you begin to find the mean for the New Jersey Devils, you can write the sum as this, which is the long way. 0 plus 1 plus a whole lot of 2's and so on, or as this, which is the shorter way. So we have 2 zeros, so 2 times 0. We have 1 times 1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 2's, so 2 times 8. So all we have to do is take how many of that number there are, multiply it like that, and then add those together. So this will be much quicker. Step 1, find the mean for each team. Alright, so here we have the work. When you actually do the multiplication and addition here and find the average, we get that the mean for the Devils is 3.2, and for the Sabres, we have 2.32. Step 2, find the absolute deviations. Again, because there are so many data points in each set, we are going to shorten the amount of work required using multiplication. Tables are given on the next slide. A new column was added to the end of the table. It represents the number of data entries for the amount of goals scored. The first 2 rows for the New Jersey Devils are shown in the table below. Step 2, find the absolute deviations. Alright, so for each amount of goals scored, we have the absolute deviation, and we have the number of data entries for this amount of goals. So there were 2 games where there were 0 goals. There was 1 game where there was 1 goal. There were 8 games where there were 2 goals, and so on for both teams. So we have our absolute deviations and our number of times that we're going to include those in our average. Do your tables look like the 2 shown below? Yes, they do. So let's move on. Step 3, find the mean absolute deviation for each team. Alright, so here's our original dot plots, but let's use the information from the tables in the previous slide. We have our standard deviations, 3.2, 2.2, 1.2, and so on, and we have the number of times that they appear in the dot plot. So we do all this multiplication, we add them all together, we get 37.6, we divide by the number of entries, 25, and that gives us an answer of 1.504, and we do the same thing for the Sabres, and we get a mean absolute deviation of 1.104. Comparison statements. 1.504 is greater than 1.104. The mean absolute deviation for the Devils is greater than the mean absolute deviation for the Sabres. This means that there is more variation in the number of goals scored by the Devils. In other words, the number of goals scored by the Devils are more spread out across the number line, whereas the number of goals scored by the Sabres are closer to the mean. Use the following data to answer the next 7 questions. Here we have 2 plots. One has the pages per chapter in Hunger Games, and the other has the pages per chapter in Twilight.